Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, mass shootings at 2 mosques in New Zealand have left 49 people dead. The suspect apparently live streaming the attacks on Facebook with a video going viral across social media. How can the biggest internet players stop the spread of violent content? Plus, U.S. state officials are in the early stages of a probe into Google, focused on antitrust and privacy in the largest coordinated effort to take on big tech since the 1990s. And a win for Qualcomm in its global dispute with Apple over how much the iPhone maker should pay for using its patented technology. But first to the story that has gripped us all today. The mass shooting at 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand has left 49 people dead. The terror live streamed apparently by the suspect on Facebook for 17 full minutes before Facebook took it down. That video still went viral on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, leaving tech platforms scrambling to keep up with their users after the massacre. It is not the first time, of course, that horrific and violent incidents have been live streamed on such platforms. In August, a shooting at an esports tournament in Florida was caught on live video. And there have been other live stream murders and suicides. But in this particular case, it was neither Facebook's technology nor its human moderators that flagged the stream. Instead, it was the police. Facebook made this statement: "Police alerted us to a video on Facebook shortly after the live stream commenced, and we quickly removed both the shooter's Facebook and Instagram accounts and the video. We're also removing any praise or support for the crime and the shooter or shooters as soon as we're aware." YouTube stated, "Our hearts go out to the victims of this terrible tragedy. Shocking, violent, and graphic content has no place on our platforms and is removed as soon as we become aware of it. As with any major tragedy, we work cooperatively with the authorities." Reddit and Twitter made similar statements. Joining me now in Seattle, we have David Chris, founder of the consulting firm Culper Partners. Before that, he was the head of the Department of Justice's National Security Division. In New York, we've got former U.S. Ambassador to the UN for Management and Reform, Mark Wallace. He's the CEO of the Counter Extremism Project. And here with me in the studio, Tech's global executive editor for Bloomberg, Tom Giles. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Ambassador Wallace, I want to start with you. The shooter clearly knew how this would play out online before this happened, and the New York Times put it this way, that this was a mass murder for the internet. How much more terrifying does that make this situation?
What makes it very terrifying is that the social media companies know how this would play out. This is not sadly, this is not a new problem. For years, the social media companies have been aware of the proliferation, the weaponization of their platforms, and the fact that people can recruit, propagandize, call to act. And there have been various extremist groups, right-wing extremists, Islamist extremists, that are propagated online. And the notion of live streaming is not new. What's shocking is that it took the social media companies 17 minutes to take it down, and the technology exists that they claim that they have to remove any uploads of any video or photographs of this material instantaneously. So there should be, and it's technologically real, possible, and now, and they claim they've been doing it to prevent any of the proliferation of this material from going up online. I think there's some really hard questions that have to be posed to the social media companies, because as far as I'm concerned, they have a real responsibility in this action. I'm not accusing them of perpetrating these horrible acts, but these platforms have been weaponized. They've known about them for a long time being weaponized, and they are not doing enough to allow the proliferation of online weaponization of these platforms.
Tom, the technology didn't work. The human moderators didn't catch it. 17 full minutes. Why not? If in any situation, it should be this one, that this should work, whatever process they have in place.
Right, without getting too much into the technicalities of it, a lot of these fail-safes that they put in place are meant for video that's already been recorded and then posted to these sites. It's a lot less effective when it's live video. The idea here is there's been so many ways that social media has enabled, citizen reporters to be out there with their camera capturing really important video. Think about the role that live video has played, for example, in helping us think differently about violence against against young black men, for instance. So that's just one way where there's been some kind of a redemptive social good here. What happens is, though, it's harder for the social media companies to vet that video as it's being streamed live. And what happened also in this case, in some of these cases, is you can actually repost live video to make it look like it's live, and so you're reposting captured video, but it makes it look like it's live. And so in a sense, all these fail-safes they put in, they really don't work in these instances, and so social media has a lot more work to do.
David, you're working with technology companies on some of these very issues, and I know you can't talk about specific companies, but when it comes to these human moderators, I mean, it's been well documented how difficult this job is. Vice has a new report out that some of these moderators can actually press snooze on the live videos for 5 minutes at a time. They can even ignore the live video streams. Despite the redemptive social good that Tom talks about here, should they be allowing live streaming at all?
Well, look, the internet is, just as your prior speakers have said, a force for good in a lot of ways, and it carries with it a lot of risks, including in respect of live video. This is an enormous challenge for the companies and for society as a whole, because it's a cultural as well as a technological problem. I think we're going to have to use technology here to fight technology, and as new techniques emerge, as opportunities emerge to misuse the internet and social media platforms, we're going to have to come up with technical solutions, because just the volume, velocity, and variety of digital data that is now out there requires machine assistance to the human moderators, and it's very taxing on the human moderators, as you say. These aren't easy problems to solve, but they're vital problems to solve. And we're going to need technology, but we also can't, sort of subordinate ourselves to our machine overlords either. So we're going to have smart policy and ethics around the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence and other kinds of algorithms to police this space.
Now, Ambassador Wallace, the reposting of these videos for hours after this happened is almost, as disturbing as, the initial video itself. YouTube, and we're getting new details about how they've handled this, has told us they have removed thousands of videos related to this incident. Think about all those users out there who are perpetrating this. I mean, is this something that at this point these companies can solve?
This is, let me respectfully disagree with Tom and David. The technology exists here and now. The San Bernardino terror attacks were the first time that social media companies acknowledged they began monitoring. Since that time, the social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, and others, have said they've employed thousands of moderators to find live content. They knew that the exploitation of live platforms, the risks were there, but because it's a moneymaker, they proceeded and pushed it. But let's be clear, there is no excuse for any video or photographs of this incident to be uploaded to be repeatedly uploaded and to be viewed by anyone. The technology called robust hashing, which is a genesis of photo DNA, which came out of the child exploitation and abuse context, and what we call eGlyph, extracts DNA signatures, if you will, of video and photographs. If I take a picture of you, Elaine, right now, and I tried to re-upload that, we could immediately and instantaneously have that removed on the internet before anyone viewed it. The social media companies claim that they have this. This is not new technology, and they're not implementing it, or they're not being transparent about its implementation. Any other statement to the contrary is an excuse.
I don't understand then. If they have this technology and it's available, they have all of these resources, why wouldn't they implement this technology?
Because remember, the model of social media companies is about our data and content. Anything that serves to filter data or minimize data or content, the social media companies have been historically quite resistant to. Anything that tries to limit that is not good for the bottom line. And they've been slow to act, and they don't want to be transparent about it. Ask the social media companies the number of videos, extremist videos and content that they've removed. I guarantee you it's in the tens of thousands. We at the Counter-Extremism Project have highlighted and flagged thousands of that content, and they have removed it. But why aren't they systematically doing it? David referred to the machine, the algorithmic solutions here. They exist. There should be no excuse for having any of this video up on the internet It can be removed instantaneously if these platforms are running this content, and it's time to ask hard questions of the social media company. This is not advanced technology, and rest assured, Elaine, they know what you want to buy, what you want to purchase, what your buying habits are, but when it comes to removing content, they don't want to do that because it's not good for business.
So we don't know exactly how many videos Facebook has had removed, though YouTube has said thousands. But David, do you want to respond to that?
Well, look, I think that the problems are a little bit harder than that. You know, there's a reference to hashtags and hashing on videos, but, you know, that's been a problem in the context of child exploitation and obscenity, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has done some very fine work there. Nobody wants that stuff up, and yet, you know, it's not totally suppressed and removed from the internet. So I do think we have to ask hard questions. I do think we have to confront this problem head on, and we do all have to do more, including the social media companies. But I guess I think it's not as simple and as easy as all that. And these technologies, including AI and ML, are still developing. We have to understand them and use them wisely and in a proper framework. As I said, we don't want to just give ourselves over to our machine overlords either. So we have to be smart and thoughtful about this.
Now, Tom, we're being really careful not to repeat anything from the Shooter's Manifesto because it was filled with, you know, clearly trolling and sarcastic comments. But there is one thing that we cannot ignore, which is a shout out that he gave to PewDiePie, which is YouTube's biggest star. He said, you know, everybody subscribe to PewDiePie, essentially. And PewDiePie, you know, made a statement about this saying, I feel absolutely sickened having my name uttered by this person. That said, this is a controversial internet character, somebody who has been accused of spreading hate, anti-Semitism. You know,
and graphic images.
And graphic imagery. What about the bigger problem of the hate, the white supremacy that lives online, but there is no bright line to remove it? I mean, it's clear when you need to remove a violent video or a shooting, you know, video of a mass shooting.
Right.
These companies are saying it is less clear when it is, you know, characterized as an issue of free speech.
How do you define it? How do you identify? How do you put parameters around it? Because when you look at it outside of this, it's very cut and dried in my view when you have a live shooting. This was a terrible, horrible event in Christchurch. But there's others where there's a much more of a gray area. And so who do you want to be in charge of that? And you know that people would be crying foul if there started to be this sense, and they have in fact done so, when you got a sense that maybe Facebook or Google or some of these other companies were acting as an arbiter of political views, for example, censoring, well, you know, hey, they're a little bit further right of me and we don't want them taking that content down, or if it's a little bit too far left, we don't want them taking that content down. So we don't trust Google and Facebook to be the arbiters of that. Who do we want to come in and do it? The state? Do we want the Chinese internet model, where the state is the arbiter and you don't get any images? So it's not a very easy, it's a big conundrum.
Mark, what do we want? I mean, look, these platforms have been designed for maximum engagement, public discourse, to prioritize free speech. You know, certainly you could imagine if from the beginning, you know, they had been designed for a more curated experience, maybe things would be different. At this point, do we need government intervention? And if so, what does that look like?
With due respect, again, this has nothing to do with artificial intelligence. This has to do humans deciding we don't want to allow certain content on the internet and having the technology, which has been widely available for a long time, ready to remove it instantaneously from the internet. And let's just talk about the First Amendment and free speech. I'm a lawyer by training. When you hear a social media company start citing the First Amendment to you, it means they're on the defensive, because they have something called terms of service, which has nothing to do with the First Amendment. If you go on Facebook and want to look at good old-fashioned pornography, you can't do it because they conclude that that is not something they want on a family-friendly program. They limit all sorts of speech on their platforms through a terms of service. It's not the First Amendment that governs it, it's the terms of service. We as a society conclude that there's all sorts of types of speech that we don't agree with. Child exploitation and abuse, stalking of women, crying fire in a crowded theater. The social media companies, whenever they start mentioning the First Amendment, that's the time to be suspicious. This is their terms of service. They don't want to enforce it. They want to have an out. And when they start getting criticized, they say First Amendment. It's just not true.
Look, Tom, there's a point here that these companies have been built and designed by humans, and there have been choices made based on certain values by human beings, and these platforms could have been designed differently. It has nothing to do with technology.
There was a failure to foresee a lot of the possible, I believe there was a failure to see a lot of the possible outcomes, a lot of the ways that people would use and misuse it. I think it was a failure of imagination on the parts of some of the creators here. There was this belief that people would use this for social good. This would connect the world. This would help, help you stay in touch with your grandparents and your children and your friends from across the country. And there was just this, there was very much a failure of imagination in place. But again, my question comes back to who then do we expect to enforce that?
We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show and the role of possible government intervention. Tom Giles for Bloomberg, David Criss of Culper Partners, Ambassador Mark Wallace of the Counter-Extremism Project, a debate we could continue to have for hours and will have over the next days and weeks. Coming up, Apple is fighting back against Spotify. Why the iPhone maker says its App Store has contributed to the music streaming site's success.